By the very nature of our Sunday readings, we often find ourselves in media res, in the middle of the action. And a lot of time, that is fine. But this time, I think a superficial reading of our first reading fails to give David the credit he deserves in prefiguring Christ. So let's look back for a moment on how David and Saul got to the point of trying to kill each other. Saul first met David when David volunteered to take on Goliath with no armor or weapons other than a sling. David's courage and heroic victory won him the praise and admiration of the people and the friendship of Saul's son, Jonathan. The first seeds of Saul's jealousy came when the songs of rejoicing attributed tens of thousands of defeated enemies to David, but only thousands to Saul. Saul conspired to get David killed, promising him the hand of his daughter in marriage if David defeated 100 Philistines. Saul figured this Herculean task would certainly result in the death of David. Unfortunately for Saul, David returned having defeated 200 Philistines. David's further military successes just deepened Saul's resentment and jealousy. Jonathan tried to negotiate peace with limited success. Finally, one day while David sat in Saul's presence playing the harp, Saul suddenly and without provocation hurled a spear at David, who barely escaped. David stayed one step ahead of Saul with the help of his wife and Jonathan. He even fled to a neighboring kingdom and had to pretend to be insane so that the king there would not detain him. Saul sought David and those soldiers loyal to him without mercy. David, meanwhile, tried his best to avoid fighting Saul, but continued defending the kingdom from their foreign enemies. Finally, after years of living on the run in the wilderness, and just 2 chapters before our reading today, David found Saul and his troops asleep in a cave. David cut the end off of Saul's robe, and when Saul was awake, he revealed himself and presented the cutting as proof of his good intentions, begging Saul to stop pursuing him. While Saul repented at the time, he would later change his mind and chase David again. And that leads us here, 2 chapters later. After what some estimate to be close to a decade of pursuit, David had Saul in his mercy once again. I think this background should give new force to Abishai's whisperings of encouragement. David had the motive, he had the opportunity, he had the encouragement, he had the weapon, the king's very spear, and he even had someone willing to do it for him. And perhaps most amazingly, he had already tried the tactic of mercy, and it didn't work. I'm surprised Abishai didn't respond to David's plan of taking the spear and water jug by saying, "Are you crazy? We just did this. He will never stop hunting you. God has given you this opportunity so you can take him out once and for all." Still, David showed mercy. But there's more. In a part of the story that our readings cut out, David, after taking the water jug and spear, when he addressed Saul's troops, letting them know what had happened, he yelled at Saul's general Abner. Here's what he said: "Are you not a man? Who in Israel is your equal? Why were you not guarding your lord the king when one of his subjects came to assassinate the king your lord? What you have done is not right." Not only did David show mercy, but he seems genuinely upset that Abner didn't do a better job defending his enemy, Saul. This whole example of the life of David is truly a perfect pairing with our gospel. Not only the golden rule, do to others as you would have them do to you, but Jesus' command to love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. I think it's easy to read this first reading on its own and say, of course David did the right thing. Obviously he shouldn't kill Saul in his sleep. And we can miss the struggle that I think would have been in my heart were I in David's place. David's actions should seem illogical, crazy, even superhuman, because what we are seeing here in David is a foreshadowing of the new Adam, Christ, who will not just save us, but will work to transform our fallen human nature from one hopelessly bound to the earth to one made for heaven. I think it's worth remembering all these details of the story of David, because in our own lives, it's very easy to rationalize, to say the Lord can't really expect me to forgive that, or to be loving to him, or to pray for her, or to turn the other cheek to them. But I can assure you, he expects nothing less. Even when it seems a Herculean task that rivals defeating 100 Philistines in battle, even when our fallen natures and our disordered passions can make no sense of it, we are called to love our enemies, do good to those who hate us, bless those who curse us, pray for those who mistreat us. To the person who strikes us on one cheek, offer the other one as well. In short, be merciful, just as our Father is merciful.